So, hello. As last class, we discussed about the introduction of to cybersecurity, right? And this class we will talk about the threats, vulnerabilities, and risk management. So, threats is like a attacks or the any potential event, right? Or a actor or human that can be natural or human made, right? That could harm an asset. If you find in general language what is threats, threats mean that can harm an asset. Asset means some valuable things, okay? And vulnerabilities means kind of weakness. That's kind of flaw in a system, okay? That that can make the flaw in the system. Suppose we have a home, right? So unlocked door can be the vulnerabilities. Threat means theft is a threat, right? And the risk management means the potential for loss, right? Risk is potential for loss. How to manage this loss? This called risk management. So the threats happens due to the weak control. Okay, then that impact the assets, right? So that full conditions called a risk. Okay, now managing that risk is called a risk management. So now we understood about the threats, that is a kind of a potential event or a human or natural event that can harm the assets, right? By exploiting a vulnerabilities. Okay. Now vulnerability is a flaw in the system or kind of weakness, and risk is a kind of impact of the threats on assets. Okay. So threats, vulnerabilities, and impact make a risk potential damage. Okay. Now managing the risk is called a risk management. So now we can say we understood about the threats, vulnerabilities, and risk management. Okay. Let's talk next what we will cover in this topic. So understand what cyber threats and vulnerabilities are, as we discussed in simple manner, and we talked about asset threats and vulnerabilities, right? And this is a risk, right? So what happened if observe here? We observe here. So we see here. This is the attackers, right? This is the weakness. Okay. This is the potential damage of the assets, right? That can cause a risk, okay? That can also event that cause a risk, right? So management of that risk to control that risk is called as a risk management, okay? So we will cover that how organize and assess and manage the cyber risk theory to real cyber incident through case studies, okay? This is our objective. So I hope you understand the calmly what is the threats, asset, and vulnerabilities in a simple manner. Okay. So let's see the next slide. Okay. So if we see the simple case study, as I give you the example of some home, right? So we said the unlocked door is a vulnerability, the attackers or the thefts or the threats, right? Assets inside the home, there are money, right? Jewelries, there's are assets, right? So risk, potential risk are harming those assets or money, right? That's a risk. And same in a digital scenario, because we are studying about the cyber security. So in a digital scenario, the data or the money, okay, online data, online money is the assets, right? And phishing attacks, threats, low user awareness. That means you're clicking on insecure links, right? And you're clicking on some dot apk apps, right? What kind of the low secure applications, right? And you're getting to be the hack to your mobile, right? And that impact is your financial loss, your personal information loss. Now that is a threat, vulnerability is impact. So if we see the same case for the bank, threats is phishing attack, okay, low awareness and financial loss to the customer. So this is a simple case, okay. Risk control. Risk is what? The impact, the three threat vulnerabilities impact become a risk, right? So that risk can be controlled by the two-factor authentication or user awareness program. That is simple logic. Okay. Now, if we go the next scenario. Next scenario means suppose there are very like conceptual and a very confidential conceptual informations are there in Ames Delhi, right? Suppose that's a hospital. There are a very you can say the high celebrities or the very known celebrities are there. Their confidential data are there, right? So attacks can be the hacking their files or data, okay, by the ransomware malware, okay, that's a virus, okay. Now Weak network segmentation or poor backup strategy can be the vulnerabilities, and patient service disrupted, right? Patient's service disrupted by using the ransomware attack. That means a malware that's lock, what it does, suppose I just first do what? I remove this one. So that will be great because continuing. Okay, so now see, here you can see clearly. Okay, the ransomware attack involve what? A malware that lock access to file, impairing regular functioning, right? So what it does, it can disrupt the patient data, right? It can hack the patient data, patient information, server information. So it can completely, the user or the doctor or the nurses, they cannot access them again. So that all important information will be hacked by the ransomware malware, right? So how will be concerning experts said, since it involves medical records, some of the most private information about an individuals, right? So when it hacked by some person, that means the all information cannot be accessed by hospital authorities, and that is taken by some attackers or hackers, right? That can be used as a blackmailing, that can be used as a disrupting the information like that. That can be used as a different resources to make the like distributed in social media, something like that, right? Now, risk control, regular backups. Right? If your data has lost, you cannot control the patients properly. So you have to regular backups, network isolation, incident response planning. Like that, you have to do. If we go to the next what we have to do. Next scenario, if we check. Next scenario, if we go, that scenario is related to the. If we go to the next scenario, that scenario is suppose in any big company there is an employee are working, right? So what kind of insider person is a threat, right? Suppose somebody is working in the company, so that person only can access, person have a login and logout details, right? The user, the company access details, so that can take the all employees data to the other company, or that can take the inside data and gives to the other person or the other competitor companies, right? So vulnerabilities is excessive access privilege. That means that employees or the insider person are using that have a more control on the data, right? Access control on the data, so that they can, whenever they have some wrong connection with the company, then they can misuse the data at some other with some other company like that, right? So impact data breach and legal issues. So now that can be controlled by the role-based access control actively monitoring, right? Or the activity monitoring of that particular employee or each employee, right? So we understood now that data leak is possible by the unprotected network, in an inadequate encryption, human error, insider threats. These kind of things are there, right? So we are just understanding few basic things, right? Basic example of the threat vulnerabilities, and that what kind of impact and what kind of risk are there, and then we are controlling that risk by some few examples, right? So what the actual risk control, risk management, role-based access control, right? Those things we will understand properly in detail in the upcoming lecture. Now just we are understanding what is threat, what vulnerabilities, and what is the risk. So that the risk is means the impact, the potential loss from the threats, right, due to the vulnerabilities. Okay. Okay. Next. So meaning of threats, vulnerability, risk, we understood. Types of cyber threats, we understood different in the scenario example. Common system and human vulnerabilities, we understand, and we understood the risk assessment, risk management process, and we got the studies about the real world cyber security case studies, right? Now let's see the what we discussed in that scenario. Let's see what kind of, let's see what kind of cyber threats are there importantly. Okay, so four commonly cyber threats are there: insider threats, malware, social engineering, system design failure. Okay, there are many, right? You can say there are, if you talk about the viruses, right? If you talk about the malware, inside the malware there are different Trojan, right? Dropper, right? We will discuss later. Rats, right? Ransomware. These are the malware. Insider threats means the person who is working inside that's leaking the information. Okay. System design failure means whatever system is designed, that software or the secure code, whatever designed, that is not working properly or that is failed to secure the data. That is kind of API security. It comes under that. We'll discuss it, right? So any potential action that can harm system or data user, that cyber test can be intentional or unintentional due to error, right? That we say the failure. Example we already discussed, right? Network attacks. People understand about the network attacks in the network security uh, study, right? There's just a initial introduction of cybersecurity. In that, we will study later on network security, right? Application data security. So it will come. So it is a denial of service and main in the middle, right? These kind of network attackers are there. Okay. If we talk about the next, that's how vulnerabilities we understood the weakness in software, hardware, or network of people. Like if we say the human body's vulnerabilities are, so what vulnerabilities are there for the if we discuss general case, right? Suppose a human is driving a bike, right? So they know the if there is a breakers, right? They know how to handle the bike, but they are not by their human behavior or their human pattern or their different kind of thinking, like what to say, the wrong thinking to the driving, right? Or the wrong driving, okay? The driver are driving like not a proper manner, right? So the weakness of the driver is what he is just jumping of the bike or the car from the breaker, right? So that's a vulnerability. That means the misuse of that condition, right? Or the giving the gap, giving the open gap so that threats can come there. Okay, that's a simple example I gave you, right? The same thing, a weakness in software, hardware, network of people. Like weakness is kind of there is a password or weak, right? The hardware weakness, that means good quality hardware or not there. The network are breaches, okay? The middle man, the middle, like that, attackers are there, hackers are sitting there, right? Exploited by attackers to cause damage. Example, we understood unpatched software, misconfigured server, lack of user awareness, right? So the four type of vulnerabilities mainly are human, software, hardware, and configuration vulnerabilities. Okay, as we discussed. Now, what is risk? What is cyber risk? Cyber risk, as we told, threats. Threats what does? Threats exploit the vulnerability that impacts the asset, right? So that combined make a risk. Okay. Third, what is the risk? The possibility of loss or damage when a threat exploits our vulnerabilities. Okay. So this is a simple thing. I hope we are understanding this. So if we talk about in details, we can say here, so suppose in a simple case, if we take example, in a simple case, okay, if we take an example like suppose this is the threads coming on, right? Threads is coming on, right? Okay. Now we say there is something as say suppose we develop some applications, right? And we say the threads are hackers for that particular application, right? So but that application has a no secure authentications, right? So we can say weak authentication. Okay, weak authentication, weak authentication. Okay, weak authentication is the vulnerabilities. Okay, weak authentication. Okay, now we understood, right? Weak authentication. Okay, weak authentication. Okay, weak authentication. Okay, so weak authentication is a vulnerability. Now, due to that weak authentication, when the hackers or the attackers are working on that particular developed software, they can take the data whatever the software is working for. Either if the software is using for some money system, that they can take money, either they can lose that software completely and that software will not the work. That's the impact on that particular application or the software, right? So now suppose the impact is if they lost 0.1%, right? 10% loss, right? Suppose. So the risk will be like this, right? Suppose they lost 100%. So it will become like completely, it will become what? It will become completely one. If they write the 100% suppose. So that will become completely one. If they 10%, 0.1, like that. So how much loss is their impact? So like that it works. The possibility of loss or damage. Okay, when a threats exploits a vulnerability. So impact includes that can be we are just understanding the basic parts of that. threats, vulnerability, and risk. Then it comes about the risk management. We will get into this slowly. Okay. Now let's see what will happen. Okay. Now impact includes financial loss, data breach, data loss, right? Money loss, reputation damage, legal consequences, right? So if we talk about that risk, so what happened if we understood the like case, if like some confidential data are there, right? Some properties data, intellectual data, and somebody has been taken that data according to the like they have a put their data in the cloud platform, right? But that has been taken. So nobody believe on that cloud platform, right? So that can be a legal consequences also, right? These are the things, these are the risks to cyber. Okay, we will discuss in details on the cloud security and other things. We will also just we are understanding what is threats, vulnerabilities, and risk. And we will slowly go to the risk management as well as we discussed earlier as well in the few slides in the scenario times. Okay, let's come to the next. I'm just missing this one. Okay, okay. Let's go to next now. Okay, okay. Before going to next, I should delete this. Okay, let's go to here. That is a stem rubber. Okay, I will delete this. Okay, okay. Okay. Now we will go to here. We will go to next slide. Okay. Now next we will understand as we discussed already. Common threats are malware, that's virus, worm, trojan, dropper, rats, okay, phishing and social engineering, okay. Phishing means messaging, okay, like app messaging, the application messaging, somebody sending you a link messaging, video messaging, like that ransomware, the hacking the complete data inside the thread, that mean man in the middle, like inside there's a employee's thread or the person who is working particular organization, they have a thread distributed denial of service, right? You can say the other threads or SQL, right? And the XSS cross scripting. There are many threads, right? So slowly we will talk about the denial of service, man in the middle attack. Okay. So these are kind of malware, phishing, ransomware, social zero-day attack, inside threat. These are the common threats when we discuss about the threats. Okay. Let's go the next anatomy of a phishing scam. So how the phishing works? Phishing means messaging or the emailing like that. Okay. So first what the if you read the first step, okay, if you go the first step, attacker send an email to the victim or a message. Okay, like maybe you have got some email that in your bank account this much money has been credited, now you have to share this much information, and like that, like sometimes there comes a message that my family person are very sick and they have something very dangerous disease and please help, something like that message comes, right? So email to the victim, then victim has sent the email, victim got the email. Second, victim clicks on the email and goes to the phishing website. Suppose the website is there and they just reach. And the phishing website, what happened when as soon as the victims reach the phishing website, what happens? Victims, as soon as enter in that website, attackers collect the victim's data. Okay. Now, what happens? Attackers uses victims' credentials to access a website. Now, later on, when attackers want to access that website or the particular other website, because attackers have the data of the victim, like credit card data, debit card, whatever data, or the login ID, password data, whatever attacker enters, whatever victim enters here, attacker can access that data. This is the process of this. Sometime what happen when victims click on the phishing messages, right, or the phishing link, then what happen? The mobile or the computer completely hacked for few hours, for the few days. That means at that time they check, the attackers check your all data. If they find any information, they can take. If they do not find any information on money, they can leave that. Something happens like that, right? Okay. Now, what are vulnerabilities? Technical vulnerability. As we discussed, there are technical, human, social, software. Many vulnerabilities are there. So if we talk about the technical vulnerabilities, that is a outdated software. Okay, outdated software means when you have you can see you have a applications, right, or the software or the system like windows, or you can say either you have a different application, each and application, or the android system you can say, or you can say the ios system, right? Every time they are updating themselves, right? But suppose you have some application or software or the operating system, you are using the old version, right? Outdated version, right? In the era of 2025, where attackers are very intelligent, but you are still using the outdated things. That may be the vulnerabilities. Okay. Open ports. Open ports means when you have a that has a different check of the open ports, that nmap, znmap can be checked how many open ports for particular website or particular system. Weak encryption algorithm, right? You are using the old encryption algorithm. We will discuss in about the cryptographic. So cryptographic chapter. Human vulnerabilities, clicking fake links, sharing password, poor security awareness, like that. Okay, that means the person who has no awareness, they just click any image, any link that can have a complete blackout of the system or the application, right? Anybody can access that after the clicking, right? The information can be obtained. Maybe there is a SQL injecting or the cross scripting while you are running that application. You don't know. So when you have a not awareness properly, then that can happen. If we go to the next, then we understood that there are a what risk. Okay, there are risk. What risk? From the threat exploit, because of that exploitation of threat, exploit the vulnerabilities and making the loss, potential loss, right? That create the risk. Okay, now that risk has to be management. Okay, risk has to be managed, reduce. That means impact of the risk should be reduced, or the impact of the threats to exploit the vulnerabilities through that loss, the assets should be reduced. So that's called a risk management. So risk management has some steps. First, it should be identify assets, like what kind of assets going to be secure. Identify threats and vulnerabilities. Okay, analyze risk level, apply controls, monitor and review risk. So if we see about the examples of a risk management, cybersecurity, risk assessment, employees training, network security audit, penetration testing, disaster recovery planning. These are the few steps how risk management cybersecurity does. Suppose, let's see simple example. Okay, we have to manage the risk to save the money which has been gone, like since last year, maybe last year, which has been gone due to sharing the OTPs at unknown person, right? So what we understood, the assets are the money or the users who has not the knowledge. What we are identifying the threats, phishing messages. Okay, the vulnerability is the human has not aware about those messages, right? So banking sending the message to aware the users, right? We are not asking the OTPs to you now. That RBI is also making the guideline. Mobile company also sending the message: do not share the OTP, do not tell to the others, like that, right? So after that, analyze the risk level. If that threats and vulnerabilities comes, how much risk can be happen, right, to that particular users? Maybe the full money loss, like what can be the loss there, right? Up to the money, there is other anything also possible. Then according to understand, like suppose understood that phishing message comes, so that the threats of the phishing message and then asset is the money, and the vulnerabilities is a lack of awareness. So that can be controlled by the awareness properly, making sure that the properly guidelines should be there. Okay, and everything should be monitored properly so that nobody will share the OTP. So now you see, 4, 5 or 6 years, there's no many guidelines or no many information and awareness about these kind of things. But if you have seen that Jamtara movies released before 6 or 7 years, something like that, and the many movies comes after that many cyber attacks happens, and then many securities processes are coming out slowly, right? So that's a system or evolve, like that evolution comes like that, right? First find out some flaws, then according to developed the conditions to secure the things, right? Or to manage the things. So that's how the evolution of the human, evolution of the security comes, right? They find the flaws, they find the threat, they've understood the cost, and they're making the security things slowly. That's called a risk management. Okay, risk treatment options. Okay, so there is a different way to treat. Suppose you have some problem. Suppose simple, listen, simple handle the problem, right? Let's talk different about if we do not talking about the cyber security. Let's talk about simple problem. If you have a project, right? So you will understand the project. Either you will do what according to the urgency of project, you will try to work it. Okay. Either you will transfer to some other person. Okay. Either you will try to reduce your task to sharing. Either you will avoid if you cannot do that project. Same thing. Project means you're working in somewhere and you have some task to do. Either you accept the task, you will transfer to some other person. Either you will share the task. Either you will avoid the task. Same thing. So how to handle risk treatment? Either we accept it, hope it doesn't happen again. Okay, we accept, use things. Okay, that happened, but it will not happen. Avoid the cancel the source of the risk. Okay, four basic ways how to treat the risk. Second is transfer the risk, move risk to someone else. Right, reduce, decrease the probability or impact it. Okay, so this is the strategy to mitigate the risk. Okay, in any scenario you can say. Okay. So that means, suppose you got some message. So what you can do? You will not click on link. You will check if one other person will click that link, and what will happen? You see. So you will transfer to other person. Either you will avoid that message, either you will accept that risk, right? Then later on you try to reduce that risk. Okay, so that's how eliminate, reduce impact, insurance outsourcing, accept low level risk. Acceptance means you accept if there is a low level, you accept if there high level, you try to eliminate the activities. Are you understood? So that's how we work on that and how we understood about the risk mitigation strategies. Okay, now if we talk about the importance of risk management, now we understood threats, we understood what kind of loss can be there, we understood the impact of the threats due to the vulnerabilities, okay, or on the assets, right? What the risk and why we need to manage the risk. So we understood what, how, now why we need to manage the risk. Because if there is cyber incidents, right, prevention should be there, right? Reduce the financial loss, confidential data loss, reduce the financial loss, confidential loss, and the intellectual data loss, right? Reduce that. Ensure business continuity. So if suppose some company in it, suppose some software company is in running conditions when starting. So if there is a start of business is there of any software company or startup company, right? But what happens is in starting only some hackers, a few hackers or a few attackers or few viruses stop that working of a startup, right? Then that cannot be work in future, right? But they have started in the early only. They started do the proper testing and proper process, and they managing the risk to understand the control, understand the what kind of risk will be possible. That we will slowly discuss application secure testing, secure code tracking, whatever the things we have like the whatever the possibilities we'll discuss slowly in the upcoming lectures. Okay. Now, if like that happen, then they cannot run properly their start, right? But if there is risk management, they can ensure the business continuity, right? Build customer trust, right? So suppose phone pay, paytm, whatever is there, google pay, this is just if we are talking about the api, right? Then if api security is there, then anybody can believe on the weather app, the money transfer app, like same way. So if the risk management is there properly, the customer trust will be there, and user will believe on the particular startup or particular company or particular management. Then outreach will be there, right? So build a customer trust meets legal and compliance needs. So there will be no legal consequences if the property risk management there, because nobody will complain about that company or about that uh, particular organizations, right? So whatever company or organization is there, they if they follow the risk management system, they can prevent the cyber incident, reduce the financial loss, ensure business continuity, and build a customer return, customer trust, and meets legal and compliance needs, and many more like that. Okay, let's go the next. So what we understood in today's discussion, we understood that threats are potential attacks, right? Vulnerabilities are weakness at some level, right? Risk arises when threats exploit vulnerabilities. That's a great things we understood. And now risk management helps reduce the damage. Okay, what risk management does? It helps to reduce the damage. Okay, risk management helps reduce the damage. Real world incident shows why cybersecurity is critical. Now, we also studied few important example. In those example, so we understood like bank example, employee, some organization examples, right? We understood that what kind of threats are there, okay? What kind of vulnerabilities are there, and how risk arises when threats exploit the vulnerabilities, right? And we understood that how the cybersecurity is critical and why we need a risk management and why we need a security, right? To protect our data, protect our information, protect our confidential things, right? Money, so the different things, right? To protect them, right? So those important things we understood today, right? So if we get to knowledge about the threats, if we recall that in starting, from starting, we understood, just once recall in the 1 minute fastly. So what we understood in simple line, threats, that means attackers, right? Threat that means any potential event or actor that could harm an asset, right? Now next, a vulnerability is a flaw in system. Like the vulnerabilities is flaw in a system. Okay, the vulnerability is it. You can say the a flaw in a system, security procedure, or internal control that could be exploited. Example: an unlocked door, unpatched software, or weak password, like that, right? And now risk is a potential loss, right? The potential for a loss, damage, or destruction of an assets when a threat actor or threats condition exploit a vulnerabilities. So risk is measured by probability and severity of impact, right? Generally risk is defined by threat cross vulnerabilities cross impact on asset value, right? So if no vulnerabilities, if system has no weakness, even a threat cannot cause a risk. Suppose as we understood this one, suppose there is no vulnerability, zero vulnerability, right? Even though there are threats, but the risk is zero. Suppose there are threats and vulnerabilities, but there are no impact on assets, zero impact. That means there are a zero risk. Okay. Ultimately, impact should be zero. Either the vulnerability should be zero because threats will always be there, right? We cannot mitigate the threats. We can protect us from the threats, right? Definitely, in upcoming evolution, threats will increase. Different kind of threats will come because of the human knowledge increasing, technology increasing, right? So threats will come, but the purpose is improve the vulnerabilities things and neglect the loss. Okay, that's a and we understood impact includes the financial data, reputation, legal consequences, right? So those things we understood. Those things we understood now. So in today's our in today's topic, today's what we have a important target is in today's discussion important topic important target is to understand the threats. Okay, what kind of threats is there, what kind of common threats are there, okay, how the threats works, okay, simple things, just a definition we understood, what the vulnerabilities, how it affect, and what kind of risk are there, what the impact, okay, these things we understood. And after that we understood how the risk management work and why risk management treated and why risk management needed and what the risk management, right? So I hope you understand this one, and I will remove this one. Then we can finish this. Okay, I will go here, and I will go here. I will go here on proper eraser, and I will remove this. And I hope you understand the threats, vulnerabilities, risk, and risk management. Thank you to listen. Thank you very much.